Coach Sully here. On this week's MatChat, we're going to talk about discipline. Now, discipline is a powerful tool that can get a lot of things done in our lives, but it can easily become avoidance. It can easily become burnout. And we have to be very, very careful that we use discipline in a beneficial way as opposed to a toxic way. So when we're using discipline, we have to make sure that it doesn't become avoidance. Sometimes what will happen is we will get lost in one aspect of our lives in order to avoid another aspect of our lives. We will use discipline as an excuse to neglect things that are important to us. We will use discipline to avoid responsibilities that we don't want to face. And it can look like the spouse that hides at work instead of going home to deal with a relationship that might be failing. It can look like the person that goes to the gym to avoid the fact that they're not happy with their careers. So we have to be careful that we're using discipline in order to make our lives complete as opposed to using it to hide behind so we don't face the things that we need to be facing in our lives. Sometimes we give things the credit of being disciplined when they're not disciplined. So what I mean by that is that sometimes we'll take something that comes to us easy, even though, and working out is a great example because most people don't like working out. And for most people, working out requires a level of discipline in order for them to get it done. But there are some people who enjoy pushing themselves and pushing their limits. There are some people that enjoy sweating and working hard. And there probably are some areas in your life that come easier than other areas in your life. But we have to make sure that we don't claim discipline for those sort of things. The person that likes going to the gym can't look down on the person that doesn't like going to the gym and say, oh, I'm disciplined, you're not. The person that enjoys going into work can't look at the person that has a hard time and say, hey, I'm more disciplined than you are because I do well with my finances, for example. Discipline actually involves you doing something that you don't want to do. And for everybody, that means something different. But we have to be careful not to, and we don't want to be down on ourselves, but we also don't want to give ourselves false credit for things that come natural, come easy. I know for me, when I started playing the guitar, for example, it wasn't something that I had to force myself to do. Now, certain aspects of playing the guitar, I did eventually have to force myself to do, but sitting down with the instrument for a few hours a day was nothing for me. So I always felt guilty when people would say, oh man, you must be disciplined. Sitting down with that, no, it wasn't something that I had to force myself to do. And a lot of people have that same sort of relationship when it comes to maybe exercise. A lot of people have that same sort of relationship when it comes to, showing up at work, maybe studying, maybe academics. We have these things that might be difficult for other people, but are easy for us. And we have to make sure that we're not falsely patting ourselves on the back for something that we haven't really earned. It's easy for the person to say that likes working out to say, hey, I get up every day and I go to the gym. Well, you like going to the gym. But when the person that doesn't like to go to the gym, they actually get up and make themselves go to the gym, that's impressive. And we all have those areas in our lives where that come to us naturally, and the areas in our lives that we have to actually push ourselves in order to get it done. And we got to make sure that we're not giving ourselves for discipline that we're not exhibiting. Now, a lot of that false credit that we apply to discipline is when we are looking at intensity versus consistency. We glorify the person that does something huge at the spur, in the spur of the moment, because the consistency is quiet. When you look at sports, for example, the Hail Mary pass that wins the game is the one that gets all the highlights. But that boring running game that consistently drives it down the field, that doesn't look so glamorous. That doesn't look so exciting. But it's the steady consistency that wins the game. A lot of times when you're starting something new, you're excited about it, you're motivated, you're pushing, you go hard, but then that fizzles out. But it's the quiet consistency when nobody's paying attention, when people have forgotten about it. It's that consistency that gets you to where you need to go and where you want to go. And a lot of times that quiet consistency doesn't get the attention that an intense push, a loud bang, a big effort gets. So we have to make sure that we're not judging our discipline, judging our efforts based on the amount of noise that it's making. Because a lot of what we do to get to where we need to go, nobody's going to be there patting us on the back. A lot of what we do to get us where we need to go is going to be quiet. A lot of the struggles that we go through, we're not going to get an award for. And we have to be willing to exhibit the consistency that it takes in order to get us to where we want to go. And we also have to be careful that our discipline isn't rigid and trying to control. A lot of times that discipline can cross the line of healthy because it's attempting to force something to happen. It's attempting to control circumstances that are outside of our control. That can look like judgment on ourselves when things don't go 100% according to plan. We might judge ourselves or judge others. There needs to be space and flexibility in our discipline so that it doesn't cross the line and it doesn't become so rigid that it becomes toxic. We can find ourselves falling into a big trap of beating ourselves over the head when things don't go 100% according to plan. We can find ourselves passing judgment on people who on the surface might look like they don't have the discipline that we have. Like I was saying earlier, we might look down on that person who has a hard time with going to the gym, for example, when that's something that comes easy and natural for us. But discipline is not useful when it's so rigid that it allows no space for shortcomings, miscalculations, mistakes. Your discipline has to allow the space for you to make mistakes and get it wrong, for you to fail. And if we're not careful, that discipline can be so rigid that it actually gets in the way of us doing the things that we want to do. Discipline is supposed to serve your life. It's supposed to serve your real life, not an imagined life, not a fantasy life. It's supposed to serve your life as it is. It has to be space for mistakes. It's a tool. It's not your identity. And sometimes you have to lay off a little bit. A lot of times we can find ourselves beating ourselves up because we need to take a break or we need to rest. And that's when discipline can get toxic. That's when discipline can get counterproductive. When we don't leave space in our discipline for us to be human beings. When we have expectations out of ourselves that are not realistic. That's when discipline isn't serving real life. Like I said, discipline is not an identity. It's just a tool. Some circumstances don't call for discipline. Some circumstances call for rest. Some circumstances call for understanding, compassion. Not all circumstances call for strict discipline. So we have to be careful. Life is multifaceted. We have work, we have family, we have health, we have spirituality, and discipline needs to facilitate those things. We can't spend all day at the gym working. We have to rest. We also have to give our relationships. We can't hide at work and call ourselves disciplined while we're neglecting family, while we're neglecting our relationships. It has to accommodate a multifaceted life. It has to allow for real life. It has to facilitate the balance that a real life needs. Now, a big part of the discipline is going to be longevity. And a lot of times, longevity can feel like it's actually not discipline. A lot of times you have to make sacrifices to accomplish longevity. You have to make sacrifices in your discipline. And we see this a lot in the martial arts world, where an athlete or somebody steps on the mat and they have all the potential, all the talent, all the signs of somebody who could possibly even become a superstar in the sport. But then maybe something can happen, an injury, or they just don't make the cut. They walk away from martial arts completely and totally forfeit the longevity aspect of martial arts, which is much more fulfilling. They're allowing their ego to dictate the benefits that they get from martial arts. And that's why longevity is going to be much more important than the short-term ego that you might get. You might step on the mat, somebody might step on the mats and look like they have all the makings of a mixed martial arts superstar. And then the person that shows up maybe twice a week might not ever get the spotlight, but then that person that shows up twice a week stays on the mats for 20 years, ends up being a huge resource to the new people that come in, ends up contributing, taking those principles from martial arts and contributing to the community, contributing to their family. And then the person that's loud at the beginning, they get all the attention. But a lot of times, your journey isn't going to be a noisy journey, but your impact is going to be felt a lot deeper when you stick with it for the long term. When you become a staple in your community, exhibiting the principles of martial arts, contributing to the students that come up under you, contributing to the community and the team. You might not have been that guy that had all the accolades starting off with. You might not have ever been that person who wowed everybody with their physical capabilities. But that longevity aspect is going to be much more fulfilling. I know I've seen it a few times. I've seen folks step on the mat and have all of the potential of being a huge talent in the sport. But then something happens, or maybe they just fall short. They walk away from the journey completely. and miss out on the longevity aspect of the journey. There's a part of martial arts that you don't get to until you put that long-term longevity, long time into it. And if you're looking at martial arts as something, and naturally so, the sport of MMA has gotten a lot of attention and it's attracting a lot of talented athletes. But there's a whole aspect of martial arts that has very little to do with competition. That if you are only getting into martial arts for the spotlight, you miss out on the contribution that you can make to your community and to the people around you. So longevity is very important. And the discipline of longevity doesn't look like a big, powerful sprint that gets you to where you want to get to quickly. A lot of that discipline goes unnoticed. A lot of that discipline is quiet. That discipline might not look like you training 5-7 times a week. It might look like you coming in once a week for a few, coming in only twice a week, but you sticking with it and staying in the community for decades. You don't get your awards after a couple years. You don't get the attention that the superstar athlete might get. But the journey is much more fulfilling. But discipline should support real life. If your discipline is too rigid, if your discipline is judgmental, if your discipline is one-dimensional, if your discipline is inflexible, if your discipline only applies to one part of your life and not to others, then you might need to ask yourself, is the thing that I'm thinking is discipline, is it really discipline? All right, folks, I gotta run. Coach Sully, Reps and Sweat, Frederick, Maryland. This was MatChat.